Have you ever heard of the doctrine of typology? It shouldn't even be an ology. It should just be like, hey, there's a callback here. Oh, look at this reference to something earlier. Look at this vague connection that I made from this thing to that thing. That's all it really is. Just to make it sound more impressive, Christians like to call it an ology, which is just like, that's a type of, this is a type of, that's a type of, like, it's a very, very silly thing, but that's fun because it's easy to debunk, and that's what we're going to be doing in this video. We're going to be debunking type. I don't want to say ology. Hey folks, welcome to Joel Reads Bible. I'm Joel. I read Bible so that you don't have to. And today we're debunking some doctrine, and it's the doctrine of typology, which is basically, like I said in the intro, just callbacks. It's looking at something and going, well, that's similar to that thing. I think it's a similar type. But did you realize there are almost 64,000 cross-references in the Bible, or hyperlinks as cool people want to call them? Yeah, I don't think there are either. I don't know where the list is. That's the thing. Like, where's the list? Do you have to, like, you get a study Bible and you just, like, count them? Is that what someone's done? I want to see a list. I want to see a website with a list. We're going to talk about three types, three typologies. One, what Christians generally think is true about, like, Joseph. And then I'm going to show certain typologies that I've observed that you're not going to like. But the thing is that when it comes to typology, you can make it up. That's the great thing about it. All of this is silly. It's all made up. None of it should be taken seriously. It doesn't matter who says it. Theology, by the way, is also just another ology. They threw ology onto a silly idea, which is the. You could throw an ology on anything. You could be like Muppetology. All of a sudden, the Muppets are actually real, living creatures and not just puppets, you know what I mean? As soon as you add ology, it just seems so much more legit. So theology, typology, they're just fancy words for, we like this particular fairy tale and we're going to make it sound legitimate. I think I'm poisoning the well, and I want to apologize for that because I want to have a genuine conversation, but I'm feeling a little bit spicy, so I want to say sorry, and let's move on in goodwill. We're going to do a goodwill discussion. And stay tuned till the end of the video because I'm going to go outside of the Bible and find some typology somewhere where you probably wouldn't expect it. We're going to start with a type that is probably generally accepted by Christians. And that is the typology of Joseph representing Jesus on some level. So the Christian idea of the typology of Joseph goes something like this. Both were loved by their dad. Joseph was the favorite of Jacob. Jesus was the favorite of God. You know, both were hated by others. Joseph was hated by his brothers. Jesus was hated by the Jews. Both were sold or betrayed for silver. Really, silver is the main typology there, that silver was involved in a selling to slavery or betraying for crucifixion. Like, those two things are like completely different, but like the silver is similar, as if, oh, they never use silver for currency typically, but what a typology. It's like, that's such a, you see how thin that is? That's so goofy. Both were falsely accused. You'd never have a story where there's so many of these in a row. Both resisted temptation, right? Joseph resisted Potiphar's wife. Jesus resisted eating rocks. So they're both very similar. Both are savior types. Joseph saved the people from a famine that God sent. Jesus saved the world from sin or death because of sin, which God decided would be the wages of sin. So they're both saviors of people from God, essentially, and then both forgave. Joseph forgave his brothers by saying, hey, you guys meant this for evil, but God meant it for good. And Jesus forgave, saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So there are just as many differences between these two stories as there are similarities, actually probably more differences, but there are these parallels that people can make up. But we can make up more. That's the really fun thing about typology, right? So in Genesis 47, verses 18 and 19, we get the part of the story where the people are so desperate for more grain that they say to Joseph, "Take our lives. We will sell our lives to you. We are now your slaves." So Joseph created a whole country full of slaves. And in the same way, Jesus was here to make us slaves to righteousness. You probably know Jesus' parable of the slave who just needs to keep preparing for his master. And when his master comes back from a long trip, he's going to judge him for not taking care of his home properly, or whatever that parable is. But it's basically describing the follower of Jesus Christ, or the person, us, as the slave, right? So that's just a beautiful typology where God and Joseph subjects people to slavery. There's even a verse in Revelation where believers are described as slaves in heaven serving God. So there's 3 different references where Jesus, through his death, is turning everyone into slaves in the same way that Joseph turned all Egypt into slaves. Slavery is the theme of the Bible. This is such a beautiful typology, isn't it? If you don't like that typology, then you're rejecting typology, because why is your typology better than my typology? Why is your typology, which is thin and stupid and pointless, why is that true? But when I make a very legitimate typology, you guys are going to go like, we don't like that one. We didn't notice that one because it's not nice. We don't want to have the bad typology. But I've got another one for you. Check out the story of Abraham and Isaac. Isaac is known as a typology for Jesus. This is obviously a typology of like Abraham being God and needing to sacrifice his son. So Isaac is Jesus, but also the ram is Jesus. Because if we follow the typology to its logical conclusion, Isaac doesn't have to die. God stops that, but Jesus did have to die. So Isaac can't really be the typology for Jesus. So I guess just Abraham is the typology for God. Jesus is not the typology for Isaac, but Jesus is the typology for the ram. That's what I was taught. So the ram, that still needs to be killed. That's Jesus, because Jesus is being killed instead of the Isaac. So we are the typology of Isaac, but the ram is the typology for Jesus, except that the ram was just magically materialized by God in a thicket, something that like Abraham had nothing to do with. It was just like this arbitrary ram so that Abraham could kill a ram, even though, why was that necessary? Well, just because God wanted him to. So the typology is telling us that Jesus being killed wasn't really a necessary thing. It was just God's whim. It's just like God wanted something killed. So he even just like made the thing to be killed. Like, whoa, that feels weird. That seems to make the whole Jesus sacrifice thing completely arbitrary and unnecessary. That's the typology, though. Like, you have to lean into your typologies, guys. Or is typology just like a way that you decide to interpret? You can interpret it any way you want. You can make up your own typology. I get it. If you have a presupposition, you just apply it to the old story and then you're away. If that's not enough for you, I've got the third typology, which is the Passover. The Passover is another typology for Jesus, right? There's the blood of the lamb that is smeared on the door. We need a blood sacrifice. We need, in Jesus' case, a human blood sacrifice. We need blood magic for this cult to work. And so we need to kill an animal and do an arbitrary sort of like blood ritual in order to stop something bad from happening. And this is where the beautiful typology comes in, because the bad thing is what God has decided to do. God could have killed just the Egyptians. He could have not killed the Egyptians. He's the bad guy. He's coming and he's going to kill all the Hebrews. He's going to kill all the Hebrew firstborns. He can't figure out who's Hebrew and who's not Hebrew, right? So he's coming. He's the villain. But he's the hero too, because if you do the blood magic ritual, then he won't kill the firstborn. He'll stop the angel of death, who he's going throughout Egypt with. They're together, right? Read the book. But God will stop him and say, don't do it, because he's going to save you from himself. That's the typology. And that's what Jesus does. He comes to save you with a blood magic ritual from himself, from the arbitrary thing he decided to do that was unnecessary. He does not have to send anyone to hell. He is not bound by any sort of greater law than just his own arbitrary decisions, because he's all powerful, guys. So he's the hero and the villain in the Passover, and he's the hero and the villain in your favorite story, the greatest story ever told with a massive plot hole. He is both, and that is just an incredible typology. But if you don't like that typology, then throw typology in the trash, because I'm trying to get our typologies up to like 65,000. I think we can do it. But guess what? We don't just have to stop in the Bible. I think that's a big mistake people do. They go, oh, we're just going to cross-reference all this stuff. First of all, there's Apocrypha. We're not even going to talk about Apocrypha, but there's Apocrypha. We can be cross-referencing like crazy from the Apocrypha. You can cross-reference into that story about Peter where a cross talks, or you can, cross-reference into the book of Enoch where fallen angel, demon, God type characters come down and use their phalluses, their physical genitals to impregnate human women. You can cross-reference all that stuff, and then it makes it so much more believable. But I want to talk about a story that predates the Bible, that's 5,000 years old. And I've been thinking about it when we've been reading so much about the giants in the Bible, and it's the story of Jack and the Beanstalk. And what's really interesting to me is there's this apologetic where Christians will say, oh, this story must be true because it shows people doing bad things. Like, it shows the Hebrews in a bad light. It makes them seem pathetic or selfish or whatever the case may be. Kind of the losers, they're immoral, what have you. But if we look at the story of Jack and the Beanstalk, he's a bit of an idiot, right? He goes and he buys beans with a cow. Like he gets tricked. They're beans. So he's not really a clever guy. He's a bit of a loser, starving. These people are the downtrodden. They're the low. And they're going to do something big. They're going to go up against giants. And we actually see that typology even sort of, and again, this isn't one for one, but it doesn't have to be with typology, right? It can be as thin as you need it to be, as long as you just can find 2 or 3 points of similarity. But we have Adam and Eve, these new people, don't really know what's going on, and they do something stupid. They disobey God, but they do that to fight against the giant and to bring the knowledge of good and evil into the world. This also mirrors the story of Prometheus, who also brings knowledge into the world and is punished for it by the gods. And as much as Jack isn't bringing knowledge into the world, it's the little guy fighting against the big guy. So that's not so different. And then we see that repeated throughout the Torah, where the Hebrews have to fight against the giants. Even David and Goliath, it's the little guy going up against the giant. And this story of Jack predates the Bible. The Bible obviously makes it more complicated and has many more moving parts and all that stuff. But that theme still exists. Jack and the Beanstalk, a typology of many different stories in the Bible. Dare I say, Jesus might just be another Jack. He's just a human, and he goes up against God to defeat him, the God who set the wages of sin being death. And I know that that's not the narrative you know it as, and it's probably not even the narrative that is supported by the text necessarily. But the point is that this is typology, right? It doesn't have to work very well. It just has to somewhat reference something else, right? That's all it is. You can even apply the story of Jack to Lucifer, right? Lucifer is in heaven and he goes up against the giant that is God. He gets punished for it. These are all just like vague, but just as true typologies. So look, typology is easy because you just have to look at something and see if it's similar. And if it is, then you just say it's a type. It's nothing. It's not prophecy. It's barely even a cross-reference. It's just a book that uses tropes, consistently using those tropes. It's not fair if you want to play a game where your typology is true and my typology isn't true. We're both just looking at the text and pointing out similarities. That's all that is. So it doesn't make it divine. It doesn't make it incredible. It doesn't make it impossible. It doesn't make it a miracle. All it makes it is a big book written by probably predominantly a similar culture of people using similar tropes to tell similar stories, building upon what the ancestors did before, building on that storytelling, telling it again. And even now we could look at like movies that have been made. We could probably find the typology of what happens in the Bible in those movies. But it's just that we know that they're fiction, right? The Bible, you still think it's true. So you go, oh, that's a typology. You think that what happened in the Old Testament was true, but they're just stories. That's probably where the disconnect's going to be, is you think that Joseph existed, but it could be that it's a story and there's no evidence of it and there's no reason to believe that it's true. But even if it is true, even if Joseph did exist and Jesus did exist, if the stories are true, the typology that I'm observing, where slavery is still accurate. You still can't dismiss my typology just because you don't like it. Typology isn't something that the Holy Spirit has bestowed on us. Typology is just observation. I hope you can see that typology is very silly, but it's also fun, and you can do whatever typologies you want. Listen, put some typologies in the comments, and if you're a Christian, you can put some typologies that you think are real. But if you're not a Christian, just like do some make-em-ups, because they are really fun, because anyone can do them. They're completely silly. They're just made up nonsense. But thank you for joining me. I read full chapters of the Bible typically, but every 10 chapters or so we take a break and just talk about something else. And this time I think I've debunked typology. Have I debunked it? I think I debunked it. Like the video if I debunked it. Leave me a comment and subscribe. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.